Hey guys, tonight we begin with something that has haunted soldiers across every century of human conflict. The endless watch, the dark hours, the standing guard. We're exploring what it was really like to spend night after night staring into darkness, waiting for something that might never come, or worse, something that definitely will. Forget the romantic notions of vigilant sentries. The truth? Most people wouldn't last 3 nights without breaking. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just been assigned to guard duty. Again, the sun is setting, and you're about to spend the next 4 to 6 hours standing in one spot, watching, listening, waiting. Your eyes will play tricks on you. Your legs will scream. Your mind will wander to dangerous places. And if you fall asleep, well, in some armies throughout history, that's a death sentence. Welcome to one of the oldest, most universal experiences in military history. Welcome to the Watch. Chapter 1. Your first night on watch. You're standing at your post. Let's say it's a century that doesn't really matter, because this experience transcends time. Could be Roman Britain in 150 AD. Could be the trenches of France in 1916. Could be a firebase in Vietnam in 1968. The specifics change, but the core experience, that stays exactly the same. It's your first Real Guard duty, and the sun has just dipped below the horizon. That twilight period, what the military calls BMNT, beginning morning nautical twilight, or ENT, end evening nautical twilight, depending on which end of the night you're on. This is when your eyes haven't adjusted yet. This is when you're most vulnerable. And you know it. Your sergeant or centurion, or whatever they call the person in charge, has just walked away. Their final words echo in your head. Stay alert. Stay awake. Don't move from this position. If you see anything, sound the alarm. If you hear anything unusual, investigate, but don't leave your post. Oh, and one more thing. The last guy who fell asleep on watch, they found him the next morning, still standing, with a sword through his chest. The officer made an example of him. You shift your weight from one foot to the other. Your rifle or spear or musket feels heavier than it did an hour ago. The temperature is dropping. In summer, this might be a relief. In winter, it's the beginning of a very long conversation with hypothermia. Let me paint you the picture of what you're seeing right now. If you're lucky, you're on a wall, a rampart, some kind of elevated position. You can see the terrain ahead, but that terrain is transforming before your eyes. Familiar trees become threatening shapes. That rock outcropping you saw clearly at noon now looks like a crouching figure. The wind moves through grass, and your brain insists it's enemy soldiers crawling toward you. If you're unlucky, you're in a listening post, forward of the main line, alone or with one other soldier, completely exposed. This was particularly delightful in World War I, where you'd be stuck in a shell hole 30 yards ahead of your own trench, knowing that if the enemy attacked, your own side might shoot you by mistake. The sounds are what get you first. During the day, you don't notice how much noise the world makes. Birds, insects, wind, human activity. But now, as darkness settles, every sound becomes amplified and suspicious. That crack of a twig, a natural occurrence or a boot step, that rustling in the bushes, an animal or an infiltrator. Your ears become hypersensitive to the point where you can hear your own heartbeat, and that becomes another source of anxiety. Is it beating too loud? Can the enemy hear it? Here's the thing nobody tells you about that first night. The fear is manageable. You're alert, you're focused, adrenaline is doing its job. It's the second night that breaks people, and the third, and the 10th. Because that first night, you survive it, you think you've got this figured out. But you don't. Not even close. Your orders are simple. Watch your sector. That might be a 90-degree arc in front of you. That might be a specific stretch of no man's land. That might be a single gate or entrance. You're not supposed to watch everything, just your assigned area. But your eyes keep drifting. What if the attack comes from the side? What if something's happening behind you and nobody knows? The weapon in your hands is both comfort and burden. It's your lifeline, your only means of defense. But it's also heavy. After an hour, your arms ache from holding it at the ready. After 2 hours, you want to set it down just for a minute. But you can't. The one time you set it down will be exactly when you need it. Let's talk about what you're wearing. If you're a Roman legionary on Hadrian's Wall, you've got your segmented armor, your larica segmentata. Looks impressive. Weighs about 20 pounds. Not terrible until you're standing in it for 4 hours in freezing rain. If you're in the trenches of World War I, you've got your wool uniform, your webbing, your steel helmet. The helmet alone weighs 3 pounds, and after a few hours, it feels like someone's pressing down on your skull with both hands. Modern soldiers? You've got body armor, a helmet, night vision equipment, a radio, ammunition, water. You're carrying 40 to 60 pounds of gear. Standing still. For hours. Your lower back starts to spasm. Your knees lock. Your feet go numb. And you can't sit down. Can't lean against anything. Can't relax for even a moment. The silence between sounds becomes oppressive. In that silence, your mind starts to wander. This is dangerous. This is how people miss things. So you start playing games with yourself. You count. You recite things you've memorized. Prayers, poems, song lyrics, the serial number on your weapon. Anything to keep your conscious mind engaged while your subconscious watches for threats. Then you hear it. A sound that doesn't fit. Your entire body goes rigid. Adrenaline dumps into your system. Your vision sharpens. Is that movement? Did something just shift in the shadows? You stare until your eyes water. You hold your breath to hear better. Was it real? Or are you already hallucinating? Welcome to guard duty. It only gets worse from here. Chapter 2. The watch rotation. Let's establish how this actually works, because the schedule of guard duty is its own special kind of torture. Different armies throughout history have used different systems, but they all share one thing in common. They're designed to maximize coverage while minimizing the chance that you'll literally die from exhaustion. The key word there is minimizing, not eliminating. The Romans had it figured out pretty well. They divided the night into 4 watches, each lasting 3 hours. First watch, from sunset to about 9 p.m. Second watch, 9 p.m. to midnight. Third watch, midnight to 3 a.m. And the fourth watch, 3 a.m. until sunrise. If you were on a standard rotation, you'd pull 1 watch per night, then have the next night off. Sounds reasonable, right? Except here's what actually happens. You're assigned to third watch, midnight to 3 a.m. So at around 8 p.m., after your evening meal, you try to sleep. Try being the operative word. Because you know you have to wake up at midnight, your brain refuses to let you sleep deeply. You drift in and out, constantly checking the time, terrified you'll oversleep and miss your watch. When midnight finally arrives, you're already exhausted. You stand your 3 hours. By 3 a.m., you're released. Now you can sleep, right? Wrong. You're so wired, so full of adrenaline from watching the darkness, that you can't fall asleep. You lie there until maybe 4 or 5 a.m., finally drift off, and then you're woken at sunrise for the day's activities. You've maybe gotten 4 hours of broken sleep, and you'll do this again tomorrow night. Medieval castles used a similar system. The night watch was divided into periods, though the exact timing varied. Compline, the final prayer service of the day, marked the beginning of the first watch. Then matins, then lauds. Monks knew these times by heart. Soldiers learned them quickly or suffered for it. In World War I, the rotation was brutal. You'd be in the front line trench for anywhere from 4 to 7 days. During that time, you'd pull guard duty every single night. The standard rotation was 2 hours on, 4 hours off. 2 hours of standing in a fire bay, watching no man's land. Then 4 hours where you could theoretically rest, except those 4 hours were also when you'd be doing all the other tasks required in a trench. Repairing the parapet, filling sandbags, dealing with latrines, eating, cleaning your weapon, writing letters. By the time you actually lay down, you had maybe 2 hours before you were back on watch. Here's a fun mathematical reality for you. If you're on a 2 hours on, 4 hours off rotation, and you're getting called for other duties during your off time, you're operating on about 3 to 4 hours of actual sleep per 24-hour period. Do this for a week straight. Now imagine what your cognitive function looks like. Your reaction time. Your ability to distinguish between a threat and a shadow. The American military in Vietnam used a different approach. In a firebase, you'd have guard towers or bunkers around the perimeter. The rotation might be 4 hours on, 8 hours off. Better, right? Except those 8 hours off included everything else. Patrols, work details, maintenance. And because you were in a combat zone, you slept in full gear, weapon within reach, ready to respond to an attack at any moment. Deep, restful sleep was not on the menu. Let's talk about the worst rotation in history. Naval watch on a warship. Because ships don't stop. The ocean doesn't take nights off. So the watch rotation on a ship runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for the entire duration of a voyage. In the age of sail, you'd work a 4 hours on, 4 hours off schedule. Every single day. For months. You'd stand your watch from, say, 8 a.m. to noon. Then you'd have 4 hours. In those 4 hours, you'd eat, you'd perform your assigned duties. You'd try to sleep in a hammock packed in with dozens of other sailors. In heat or cold. In calm seas or storms. Then back on watch from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. for hours off. Watch from midnight to 4 a.m. for hours off. Repeat. Forever. Here's what this does to the human body. You never get more than 4 hours of continuous sleep. Your circadian rhythm, your body's natural sleep-wake cycle, completely breaks down. You exist in a state of permanent jet lag. Studies of modern sailors on similar schedules show cognitive impairment equivalent to being legally drunk. Now add the stress of potential combat, the physical labor, the poor nutrition, and you've got a recipe for disaster. The changing of the guard itself is a moment of vulnerability that every army in history has worried about. There's a handoff period where both soldiers are present. The soldier coming off watch needs to brief the new guard. What have you seen? Any unusual activity? Any changes in orders? This conversation needs to happen, but it also means there's noise, movement, distraction, the perfect time for an enemy to strike. Some armies developed elaborate protocols for the changing of the guard. Passwords, challenge and reply systems. The approaching guard would be challenged. They'd give the correct password. Only then would they be allowed to approach. Get the password wrong, even by one word, and you might get shot by your own side. Passwords changed daily, sometimes multiple times per day. They were usually chosen to be difficult for the enemy to pronounce. During World War II in the Pacific, American forces used passwords with lots of L sounds, because Japanese speakers often struggled with that consonant. Lollapalooza. Try saying that quickly when you're nervous and someone's pointing a rifle at you. The worst part of the rotation isn't the time you're actually on watch. It's the time immediately before. Knowing you have guard duty in 3 hours. Trying to rest but unable to because anticipation keeps you awake. Checking your equipment repeatedly. Making sure your weapon is clean, loaded, ready. Rehearsing in your head what you'll do if something happens. And then there's the mathematics of exhaustion. Let's say you're on a week-long rotation in the trenches. 7 nights of guard duty. 2 hours per night is 14 hours of standing watch. But you're also losing sleep before and after each watch. Conservatively, you're losing 2 hours of sleep per night due to the watch rotation. Over 7 days, that's 14 hours of lost sleep. You're operating with the equivalent of missing 2 full nights of sleep, while being expected to make life or death decisions. Different commanders had different philosophies about watch rotation. Some believed in spreading it out. Everyone does a little, nobody does too much. Others believed in concentrating it. A smaller group of soldiers pulls all the watch duty, becoming specialists in it, while the rest of the unit gets full rest. Both systems have advantages. Both will grind you down eventually. Here's the final twist. In some units throughout history, if you fell asleep on watch, the punishment wasn't just for you. Your entire squad would be punished. Extra duties, reduced rations, sometimes worse. So now you're not just fighting your own exhaustion. You're carrying the burden of knowing that if you fail, everyone you serve with suffers. That's a special kind of pressure. The watch rotation never ends. Even when you're relieved, even when you're off duty, you're always counting down to the next time. It becomes the organizing principle of your existence. Everything is measured in relation to when you next have to stand guard. Sleep is measured in hours until watch. Meals are timed around watch. Everything else is secondary to the watch. And the worst part? You can't even look forward to it being over, because tomorrow night you'll do it all again. Chapter 3. The cold. Let's talk about what cold really means when you're standing guard. Not the kind of cold where you go inside and make hot chocolate. Not the kind where you put on an extra sweater. I'm talking about the cold that enters your bones and sets up permanent residence. The cold that makes you forget what warmth feels like. The cold that can kill you while you're standing upright, eyes open, still technically on duty. You're 2 hours into your watch. It's winter. Let's say you're on Hadrian's Wall or the Eastern Front or Valley Forge or any of 1,000 places where soldiers have stood guard in temperatures that shouldn't support human life. The temperature is somewhere around 20 degrees Fahrenheit. That's -7 Celsius. With wind chill, it feels closer to zero. You started your watch already cold. There's no warming up before you take your position. You walked from your barracks or your tent or your dugout, and the brief movement generated some body heat. But now you're standing still. And when you're standing still, your body's heat production drops dramatically. You're generating maybe 100 calories of heat per hour just from existing. You're losing 200 calories per hour to the environment. Here's what happens minute by minute. First 15 minutes, you're okay. You're still riding on whatever warmth you brought with you. Your fingers are getting cold inside your gloves, if you even have gloves. Many soldiers throughout history didn't. Roman legionaries on the northern frontier had to wrap their hands in rags. Medieval guards had leather mittens that did almost nothing. Even in World War II, standard issue gloves were wool, which is great until it gets wet. Then it's useless. 30 minutes in, your toes go numb. You're wearing boots, maybe if you're lucky. Could be leather boots that let in water. Could be modern combat boots with supposedly thermal linings. Doesn't matter. You're standing on frozen ground or snow or ice, and that cold is conducting straight through the soles into your feet. You try wiggling your toes. Can't feel them anymore. This is concerning but not yet alarming. 45 minutes. Your fingers have progressed beyond cold into pain. That deep, aching pain that makes you want to shove your hands into your armpits. But you can't because you're holding your weapon. That weapon, by the way, is now a lump of frozen metal. If you're holding a rifle, the steel is cold enough to stick to your skin. If you touch the barrel with your bare hand, you'll leave skin behind. If you're holding a spear or sword, same problem. The cold metal conducts heat away from your hands faster than your body can replace it. 1 hour in, you're shivering. Not the gentle shiver of someone who's a bit chilly. The violent, uncontrollable shaking of a body desperately trying to generate heat through muscle movement. This is good in a way. Shivering means your core temperature is still normal enough for your body to fight back. But it's also exhausting. Shivering burns calories. Lots of them. You're now burning 300 to 400 calories per hour, just staying alive. Let's talk about what you're wearing. If you're a Roman soldier, you've got your tunic, your armor, maybe a cloak if you're lucky. The cloak is wool. Good wool, properly maintained, can keep you alive in cold weather. But it has to stay dry. The moment it gets wet, from rain or snow or even just your own breath condensing, it loses most of its insulating value. And you will get wet. Moisture from your breath, from sweat, from the environment, it all collects in your clothing. That moisture freezes. Now you're wearing clothes that are stiff with ice. World War I soldiers in winter had it particularly bad. Wool uniforms, leather boots, and the goddamn trenches were always wet. Always. Standing water, mud, sometimes actual ice on the floor of the trench. Your feet were wet from the moment you entered the trench until the moment you left. Trench foot became epidemic. That's where the tissue of your feet literally starts to die from prolonged exposure to cold and wet. It's not frostbite. It's worse. Frostbite freezes tissue. Trench foot rots it while it's still attached to you. Hour 2. If you're still just shivering, you're lucky. But there's a good chance you've progressed to the next stage. Your shivering starts to decrease. This is bad. This is very bad. Decreased shivering means your core body temperature is dropping. You're now hypothermic. Not severely yet, but you're on the slope. Your thinking gets fuzzy. You know you should be watching for threats, but you can't quite focus. Your vision narrows. You're only seeing the center of your field of view clearly. Peripheral vision starts to fade. This is terrible for guard duty because threats typically come from the edges of your perception, not straight ahead. You start making mistakes. Maybe you think you see something. You challenge it. It's nothing. A shadow. A bush. Your judgment is impaired. You're now a liability, but you can't leave your post. In some armies, leaving your post early, for any reason including imminent death from hypothermia, was punishable by execution. Let's talk about historical examples because this isn't hypothetical. During Napoleon's retreat from Moscow in 1812, soldiers would fall asleep standing up while on guard duty. Fall asleep isn't quite right. They'd lose consciousness from hypothermia. Their bodies would remain upright for a while, frozen in place. In the morning, they'd find guards frozen solid, still at their posts, still technically obeying orders. Valley Forge, winter of 1777 to 1778. Washington's Army. Soldiers standing guard in below freezing temperatures without adequate clothing. The Army documented cases of sentries literally freezing to death at their posts. There are reports of guards being relieved only to collapse immediately, unable to walk after hours of standing in the cold. The Eastern Front, World War II. German soldiers in winter 1941, unprepared for Russian winter. Temperatures dropped to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature where Fahrenheit and Celsius meet, where cold becomes so extreme that the scale doesn't matter anymore. Guards would freeze to their weapons. Their eyelids would freeze shut. Moisture in their breath would freeze into ice crystals that cut their faces. Hour 3. If you make it this far, if you're still conscious and still at your post, you're running on fumes. Your body has burned through its readily available energy. You're consuming muscle tissue now, just to keep vital organs warm. Your extremities, your fingers and toes, they're sacrificed. Your body is actively letting them freeze to preserve your core. You can't feel your feet anymore. When you try to shift weight, your legs don't respond the way they should. Your coordination is shot. If you had to run, you'd probably fall. If you had to fire your weapon, assuming it's not frozen solid, your trigger finger wouldn't respond properly. And here's the cruelest part. The cold makes time move differently. Each minute feels like 10. You're constantly checking how much time remains in your watch. 30 minutes left feels like an eternity. You bargain with the universe. Just let me make it to the end of this watch. Just let me stay conscious until relief arrives. When relief finally does arrive, when the next guard shows up to take your place, you can barely speak. Your jaw is locked from shivering and cold. You try to give the situation report and your words slur. The incoming guard looks at you and sees what they'll become in 4 hours. There's no sympathy, just grim recognition. You stumble back to wherever you're supposed to sleep. You should take your boots off, but your fingers don't work well enough to untie the laces. You should take off your wet clothes, but you don't have the energy. You collapse onto your bunk or bedroll or pile of straw, and your body starts to warm up. This should feel good. It doesn't. The warming process is agony. As blood flow returns to your extremities, the pain is intense. Burning, stabbing, throbbing pain. Your fingers and toes feel like they're on fire. You might lose some of those fingers or toes. Frostbite damage won't be apparent for days or weeks. The tissue that froze might turn black and fall off. You might develop infections. You might have nerve damage that lasts forever, where your hands and feet never quite feel right again, where they're always hypersensitive to cold. But you can't think about that now, because you need to sleep. You need to recover, because tomorrow night, or maybe even tonight on a different watch, you'll do it all again. The cold will be waiting. It's always waiting. And each time it gets a little harder to fight it off. Welcome to Winter Guard Duty. Hope you like all your fingers. Chapter 4. The Sounds of the Night. Your ears are the most important sense organ you have on guard duty. Your eyes can be tricked by darkness, by shadows, by exhaustion. But your ears, properly trained and desperately alert, can pick up threats long before your eyes confirm them. This is both your advantage and your torment, because the night is never actually quiet. And learning to distinguish between the sounds that matter and the sounds that don't is an exercise in controlled paranoia. You're standing your watch. Let's say it's somewhere between midnight and dawn, the darkest hours. Your eyes have adjusted as much as they're going to, which means you can see shapes and movement but not details. So you're relying on sound. And oh, the sounds you'll hear. First, there's the ambient noise, the stuff that's always there but you don't notice during the day. Wind is always there, even on supposedly calm nights. It moves through trees, creating a constant susurrus of leaves and branches. This sound is your baseline. This is what normal sounds like. Except when the wind drops suddenly, when it goes silent. That's when you need to worry because predators, human and otherwise, often move when the wind stops. If you're near water, there's that sound. Rivers gurgle and rush. Lakes lap at shores. The ocean is a constant presence. Waves rolling in with metronomic regularity. This is actually helpful. The rhythmic sound of water can mask your own small movements and sounds. But it also masks the enemy's movements. They know this too. Animals. This is where it gets interesting. The night is full of creatures going about their business, completely indifferent to your war. Owls hoot, foxes scream, and if you've never heard a fox scream, it sounds exactly like a woman being murdered. The first time you hear it on guard duty, your heart rate spikes to about 150 beats per minute. Deer crash through underbrush with all the subtlety of an advancing platoon. Rabbits, when startled, bolt with explosive suddenness that sounds exactly like someone running. You learn these sounds. You have to, because if you raise an alarm every time a fox screams, you'll get a reputation. And that reputation will follow you. You'll be the soldier who cries wolf. When you do spot something real, nobody will believe you. So you train yourself to identify animal sounds. This owl calls from the same tree every night at about 2 a.m. That fox hunts in the field beyond the perimeter every night around 3. Those deer always move through this area just before dawn. But here's the problem. The enemy knows these sounds too. They've been observing. They know that at 2 a.m., an owl calls. So they use that moment to move, knowing that if you hear something, you'll attribute it to the owl. They know the deer move at dawn. So they move with the deer using the natural noise as cover. Now let's talk about human sounds. The ones that make your blood freeze. Cough in the darkness. Could be an enemy soldier who couldn't suppress it. Could be one of your own guys further down the line, dealing with a cold or breathing in dust. You stand there, trying to determine direction and distance based on that single sound. Was it close? Far? In front of you or behind? Footsteps. This is the big one. Human footsteps have a distinctive cadence, but so do deer and foxes, and sometimes the wind moving through gravel sounds exactly like careful footsteps. You stand there, head cocked, trying to pick out a pattern. Regular intervals between sounds suggest intentional movement. Irregular suggests an animal. But smart infiltrators know this. They'll deliberately vary their pace. Metal sounds, equipment rattling, a weapon being shifted, a canteen bumping against a belt buckle. In older eras, armor creaking, mail jingling, a sword scraping in its sheath. These sounds are unmistakable. These are human. These are military. When you hear these sounds at night, from outside your perimeter, you know something is happening. Except when it's your own equipment. That rifle sling that seemed fine during the day now squeaks every time you move. Your own gear settling on your body makes small metallic sounds. Is that you? Or is that them? You freeze, absolutely still, listening, waiting to hear it again. Voices, whispered conversations in the dark. You definitely heard something that sounded like talking. But did you? Or was it the wind in the trees? Human brains are pattern-seeking machines. We find meaning in randomness. White noise can sound like whispered words if you listen long enough. You've been on watch for 3 hours. Your brain is tired. Is that actually voices? Or are you starting to hallucinate? During World War I, soldiers in trenches reported hearing German soldiers talking, singing, even music from gramophones. Sometimes this was real. The trenches were close enough that you could hear the enemy clearly on quiet nights. But sometimes it was auditory hallucinations brought on by stress, exhaustion, and the monotony of listening to the same positions night after night. Let's talk about the sounds of no man's land specifically, since this is one of the most documented sound environments in military history. Between the trenches, there was this zone of death. Could be 30 yards wide, could be 300, and it was full of sounds. First, the wounded. Men hit during the day's fighting, left out in no man's land because retrieval was impossible. They'd call out for their mothers, for God, for water, for death. These sounds would continue for hours, sometimes days. Guards in the trench would stand there, listening to men dying slowly, unable to help. After a while, those sounds would stop. New silence, which was somehow worse. Wire. Barbed wire barriers made their own sounds. Wind moving through wire created tones, almost musical. But more importantly, anything moving through wire made noise. Caught on a barb, clothing tearing, the distinctive twang of wire being cut. That last sound, wire being cut, was the sound that made every guard reach for their flare gun or rifle. Because wire being cut meant one thing. Someone was trying to get through. Rats. No man's land was full of rats. Huge rats feeding on corpses and garbage. These rats would move through the wire over bodies through craters. They'd make scratching sounds, squeaking, fighting with each other. And here's the thing, a large rat moving through wire can sound remarkably like a human crawling. Artillery. Even on quiet nights, there was almost always artillery somewhere. Distant guns firing. The whistle of shells passing overhead. The crump of explosions far down the line. This became background noise. You'd learn to judge distance and direction. Those shells are landing 2 miles away. That's not your problem. But when the shelling got closer, when the whistle got louder, your full attention snapped to it. Because shells didn't always land where they were aimed. And then there's the sound that every guard dreaded. Silence. Complete, total silence. The absence of all ambient noise. Because this either meant nothing at all, or it meant that every living creature in the area had gone still and quiet in response to a threat. When the forest goes silent, when the insects stop chirping, when the wind seems to hold its breath, that's when you know something is wrong. Modern guards have different sound challenges. Night vision equipment gives you better visual awareness, but it also narrows your field of view. You're more dependent on hearing for situational awareness. And modern warfare is loud in different ways. Generators running in the base, aircraft overhead, radio chatter in your earpiece. All of this interferes with your ability to hear approaching threats. But across all eras, all conflicts, there's one sound that remains constant. The sound of your own breathing, the sound of your own heartbeat. In moments of peak tension, when you think you've heard something and you're frozen in place, listening with every fiber of your being, these sounds become deafening. Your breath sounds like a windstorm. Your heartbeat sounds like drums. You try to breathe more quietly, but that makes you hyperventilate. You try to slow your heartbeat, but adrenaline makes it race. Hours of this. Hours of hypervigilant listening. Your ears start to ring. Tinnitus from the stress and the silence. You start hearing sounds that aren't there. The brain, desperate for input, starts generating phantom sounds. This is well documented. Guards report hearing music, voices, mechanical sounds, all of which aren't actually present. The final hour of your watch is the worst for sound, because now you're listening for the sound of your relief approaching, the sound of friendly footsteps, the challenge and password exchange. But what if those footsteps aren't your relief? What if that's the enemy, knowing that this is when guards are most likely to drop their vigilance? So you listen, and you wait, and every sound could be everything or nothing, and you won't know which until it's potentially too late. The night is full of sounds. Learning which ones will kill you is the trick. And tomorrow night you'll do it all again. Listening, always listening. The sounds of the night never stop, and neither does your watch. Chapter 5. The Battle with Sleep. Here's the simple biological truth that every military in history has had to contend with. The human body needs sleep. Not wants. Needs. Your brain requires sleep to function. Your immune system requires sleep to repair. Your muscles require sleep to recover. And yet, here you are, standing guard at 3 a.m. in your third hour of watch, having slept maybe 4 hours in the past 48, and you are not allowed to sleep. Not for 1 second. Because if you do, people might die. Including you. Let's talk about what sleep deprivation actually does to you. Minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. Because this is the real enemy on guard duty. Not the human enemy out there in the darkness. The enemy inside your own skull. The overwhelming, crushing need to sleep that will use every trick in the biological book to shut you down. You're 1 hour into your watch. You're already tired because you haven't slept properly in days. The initial adrenaline of taking your post has worn off. Your eyes start to feel heavy. This is your body's way of suggesting, hey, this standing still in the dark thing we're doing, this would be a great time to sleep. You blink hard. Shake your head. Force your eyes open wider. Hour 2. Your eyes are betraying you. They want to close. Blinking becomes longer. Each blink lasts a fraction of a second longer than the previous one. You're micro-sleeping and you don't even know it. Your eyelids droop. Close. Stay closed for 1 second. 2 seconds. Your head nods forward slightly. Then your brain screams danger and you jerk awake. Heart pounding. Terrified. Did anyone see that? How long were you asleep? Felt like a second. Could have been 10 seconds. Could have been a minute. This microsleeping is well documented across military history. Guards would swear they were awake the entire time. They'd have no memory of sleeping. But other soldiers watching them would see their heads drop, see them sway on their feet, see them completely unresponsive for seconds at a time. The brain can enter sleep state while the body remains upright. This is extraordinarily dangerous. Let's talk about the techniques soldiers used to stay awake. Across every era, across every army, soldiers have developed methods. Some work, some don't. All of them are desperate measures by desperate people. Physical pain. This is the most common. You pinch yourself. Hard. Hard enough to leave bruises. You bite the inside of your cheek until you taste blood. If you're holding a weapon with a bayonet or sharp edge, you press it against your skin. Not enough to cut, but enough to hurt. Pain triggers alertness. For a few minutes. Then your body adapts and the pain becomes just another sensation your exhausted brain ignores. Some soldiers carry small sharp objects specifically for this purpose. A nail in the pocket. Press it into your palm when you feel yourself drifting. The pain jolts you awake. Roman soldiers reportedly used similar techniques. A sharp stone. The edge of armor pressed against skin. Anything to generate that wake-up signal. Movement. You're supposed to stand still at your post. But if nobody's watching, you shift weight constantly. Rock from foot to foot. Flex your leg muscles. Tense and release. March in place very slowly, very quietly. The movement keeps blood flowing, keeps your metabolism up, keeps your brain engaged. Some guards develop elaborate routines. 10 shifts of weight to the left, 10 to the right, flex left calf, flex right calf. Repeat, but this only works for so long. Eventually, your body recognizes the pattern. The repetitive movement becomes automatic. An automatic movement doesn't prevent sleep. You can sleepwalk through a routine. Mental exercises. Count things. Recite things. Do mathematics in your head. Name all the states in alphabetical order. List every player on your favorite sports team. Sing songs in your head, not out loud because that would compromise security. The goal is to keep your conscious mind active enough that your subconscious can't hijack the controls and shut you down. World War I soldiers developed elaborate mental games. Plan what you'll do when the war is over in excruciating detail. Design your dream house, room by room, furniture placement, color schemes. Plan a fantasy meal, every course, every ingredient. The more detail, the better. It occupies the mind. Stimulants. Coffee, if you can get it, is the soldier's best friend. But coffee before a watch only helps for an hour or two. Then the crash makes things worse. Tea. Stronger beverages if available. In modern times, energy drinks. Caffeine pills. In World War II, amphetamines were literally issued to pilots and guards. Take this pill, stay awake for 12 hours, experience minimal consequences. Except the consequences were not minimal. Heart palpitations, anxiety, and eventually the drug would wear off and you'd crash harder than ever. Chewing tobacco, smoking. Nicotine is a stimulant. Soldiers who never smoked before military service often started purely for this reason. The act of smoking kept your hands busy. The nicotine kept you alert. The ritual marked time. But you had to be careful. The glow of a cigarette at night could give away your position. Many armies banned smoking on watch. Guards would cup cigarettes, hide them in their helmets, take quick drags while hiding the ember. Here's what happens when these techniques fail. When you're so sleep-deprived that no amount of pain or movement or mental gymnastics keeps you awake. You start hallucinating. This is not an exaggeration. Prolonged sleep deprivation causes visual and auditory hallucinations in most people after 48 to 72 hours of minimal sleep. You see things that aren't there. Shadows move with purpose. You see figures approaching. You see entire groups of enemy soldiers that vanish when you look directly at them. Your peripheral vision fills with threatening movement that disappears when you turn your head. This is your brain, desperate for rest, starting to dream while you're still awake. You hear things, conversations, music, your name being called, commands being shouted. All of this seems completely real in the moment. Guards have been documented firing weapons at hallucinations, raising alarms for attacks that never happened, running from positions to escape threats that existed only in their sleep-deprived brains. The worst hallucinations are the familiar ones. You hear your mother calling you. You see your wife or girlfriend standing just beyond the perimeter. You hear children laughing. Your brain, desperate for comfort, for home, for safety, starts generating these visions. And for a moment, they're so real you could swear they're actually there. Some soldiers report a specific type of hallucination that's common across different eras and conflicts. The feeling of a presence. Someone standing right behind you. You can't see them, but you know they're there. You can feel them. The hair on your neck stands up. You spin around. Nothing. But the feeling persists. This presence follows you, watches you, stands just out of sight. This is your brain, so exhausted it can't properly process sensory input, creating ghosts. Let's talk about the consequences of falling asleep on watch. Because the penalties varied widely depending on the army, the time period, and the severity of the security situation. But across the board, falling asleep on watch was considered one of the most serious offenses a soldier could commit. Roman army. The penalty for sleeping on watch was death. Fustuarium. The sleeping guard would be beaten to death by their fellow soldiers using clubs and stones. This wasn't secret or shameful. It was public. The entire unit would participate. The message was clear. You don't just endanger yourself. You endanger everyone. And everyone has a right to punish you for it. Medieval armies depended on the commander. Some would execute on the spot. Others would use corporal punishment, flogging, being tied to the whipping post and given 30 or 40 lashes, which doesn't sound too bad until you realize that flogging could, and often did, result in death, or at minimum infections and permanent scarring. Napoleonic era, court-martial. If found guilty, you could be shot. But often the penalty was reduced to hard labor or being drummed out of the army in disgrace. Being drummed out meant your career was over, your reputation destroyed, your ability to find work severely limited. In an era before social safety nets, this could be a life sentence to poverty. American Civil War. Technically, sleeping on watch could result in execution. In practice, it rarely did. More common punishments included being tied up standing for days at a time, being forced to march around camp carrying heavy weights, or being placed in the guardhouse on bread and water rations. World War I and II. Court-martial with potential for execution, especially during active combat operations. But the military had figured out that executing tired soldiers wasn't great for morale. More common was reduction in rank, forfeiture of pay, extra duties, or transfer to more dangerous positions. Modern military. Non-judicial punishment. Article 15 in the U.S. military. Loss of rank. Loss of pay. Extra duty. But here's the thing. You don't usually get caught falling asleep unless something bad happens as a result. If your sleeping allows a breach, allows an attack, allows casualties, then you're facing much more serious consequences. Potential jail time, dishonorable discharge. But the real punishment isn't official. It's social. Your fellow soldiers know. They know you fell asleep. They know you can't be trusted. In a combat environment, trust is everything. Lose that trust and you're isolated. Nobody wants you watching their back. Nobody wants you in their squad. You become a pariah. The irony, the cruel irony, is that the fear of falling asleep makes it harder to stay awake. Your brain, consumed with anxiety about sleeping, uses so much energy on that anxiety that it has less energy for actual alertness. You stand there, terrified you'll fall asleep, and that terror exhausts you further, making sleep more likely. Hour 3 of your watch, maybe hour 4 if you're unlucky. You're beyond tired. You're beyond exhausted. You've entered a fugue state where you're not really awake but not really asleep. You're standing. Your eyes are technically open. You're going through the motions. But you're not processing information anymore. You're not making decisions. You're a biological machine going through programmed motions while the conscious mind has checked out. This is when bad things happen. This is when you miss the wire being cut. Miss the movement in the shadows. Miss the enemy infiltrating. Miss the early warning signs of an attack. And people die, maybe including you. The only salvation is the end of your watch. When your relief finally arrives, you hand off your position in a fog of exhaustion. You stumble to your sleeping area, and your brain, finally given permission, shuts down completely. You're asleep before you hit your bunk. Deep, dreamless sleep, the sleep of the dead. And 4 hours later, someone will wake you, and you'll do it all again. Welcome to the war against sleep. You're already losing. Chapter 6. What you're actually watching for. Let's get specific about what guard duty actually entails. Because stand here and watch sounds simple until you realize you're trying to detect threats in conditions specifically designed to hide threats. You're looking for something that doesn't want to be seen, listening for someone who's trying to be silent, attempting to identify danger before it identifies you. This is a game of cat and mouse, except you're often not sure which one you are. Your assigned sector. Let's say you're responsible for a 90-degree arc of terrain stretching from your left limit of advance to your right limit of advance. Could be 50 yards. Could be 500 yards. Everything in that sector is your responsibility. Every movement, every sound, every shadow. If something happens in your sector and you miss it, that's on you. First, you need to know that sector intimately. During daylight, before you take your watch, you study it. That tree line is 120 meters away. There's a small depression in the ground at about 80 meters. There's a distinctive rock formation at the far left edge. There's a dead tree that leans at an angle right side of the sector. These are your reference points. At night, when you can barely see anything, these reference points become crucial. You're looking for movement, but not all movement. Wind makes everything move. Grass, bushes, branches. You have to learn your sector's natural movement pattern. This is what normal looks like. That bush always sways in the wind. Those branches always rustle. This is baseline. Anything that deviates from baseline is what you care about. Movement that goes against the wind. That's a red flag. Movement that starts and stops in a pattern that doesn't match natural rhythm. That's a red flag. Movement that's low to the ground, horizontal rather than vertical. Red flag. You're trying to spot movement that indicates purpose. Intentional movement. Human movement. Different eras had different movement patterns to watch for. Medieval guards watching for approaching enemies would look for the glint of metal in moonlight. Armor, weapons, helmets. These things catch light in ways that natural objects don't. A moving spot of reflected light in your sector means someone's approaching in gear. Colonial-era guards were watching for Native Americans, who were extraordinarily skilled at moving silently and invisibly. The techniques for detection were different. Watch the tree line for shape changes. The human silhouette, even when trying to blend with nature, has certain tells. Symmetry. Trees aren't symmetrical. Rocks aren't symmetrical. But the human form, even crouched, maintains bilateral symmetry. Your brain is wired to detect this symmetry. If something in your sector looks too symmetrical, investigate. World War I. You're watching no man's land. The area between trenches. This area is known, mapped, measured. You know exactly how far to the German wire. You know where the shell craters are. You know where bodies are lying that can't be recovered. These are your reference points. If a crater that was empty yesterday has a shape in it today, that's a problem. If the wire shows a gap that wasn't there before, that's a problem. The challenge with no man's land is that it's constantly changing. Artillery reshapes the terrain every single day. New craters, new debris, so your reference points shift. What was a landmark yesterday might be gone today. You're trying to maintain situational awareness on terrain that refuses to stay constant. Vietnam. You're watching jungle. Can't see more than 20 or 30 meters in daylight. At night, you're lucky if you can see 5 meters. You're not watching for distant threats. You're watching for close threats. The tree line where it meets your perimeter. The gaps between trees. The undergrowth. You're looking for shapes that don't belong. The outline of a helmet. The barrel of a rifle. The shifting of vegetation in a pattern that suggests someone crawling. Modern warfare. You've got night vision, thermal optics, motion sensors. Technology has changed the game, right? Not as much as you'd think. Night vision gives you better visual range, but it also creates tunnel vision. You're staring at a green-tinted world through a narrow field of view. Peripheral awareness decreases, and night vision doesn't work well in certain conditions. Fog, heavy rain, smoke, dust. Under those conditions, you're back to Mark I eyeball, just like guards from 1,000 years ago. Thermal optics are better in some ways. They detect heat signatures. A human being shows up as a bright blob against the cooler background. But thermal has limits too. If the enemy knows you have thermal, they use countermeasures. Heat blankets, cooling suits, timing their approach when the ambient temperature is closer to body temperature, which reduces contrast. You're also watching for specific indicators beyond just movement. Like, an undisciplined enemy might use flashlights, cigarettes, vehicle headlights in the distance. Any light source at night is a beacon. You're trained to spot even brief flashes. A lighter spark to check a map. A phone screen illuminated for just a second. These mistakes get people killed. Sound we've covered. But you're listening for specific sounds. Digging. The enemy might be digging a tunnel, building a trench, preparing a position. The sound of shovels hitting dirt has a distinctive rhythm. Rhythmic mechanical sounds. Engines. Generators. These indicate enemy activity, enemy positions. Voices. Even whispered. The direction and rough distance help you build a mental map of where the enemy is. Smell. This one surprises people. But guards are trained to use smell. Cigarette smoke carries on wind, cooking fires, diesel fuel, human waste. All of these smells indicate human presence. During Vietnam, American soldiers claimed they could smell Vietnamese fighters in the jungle because their diet was different. They smelled different sweat, different breath, different digestion. Whether this was true or confirmation bias is debatable. But the military took it seriously enough to include olfactory awareness in training. You're also watching for the absence of normal. The baseline we talked about includes the normal sounds of night. Insects, birds, small animals. When these sounds stop, that's a huge red flag. Animals are better at detecting threats than humans. When they go silent, they're reacting to something. That something might be your enemy. Different enemies require different observation patterns. Watching for a conventional military force was one thing. They moved in groups. They used vehicles. They brought equipment. Lots of signature to detect. But guerrilla forces, insurgents, these groups specialized in being invisible. Single person or very small teams. Minimal equipment. Intimate knowledge of terrain. They knew where you were watching and avoided those areas. So you're also watching places that seem unlikely. The path that nobody would use because it's too exposed. That might be exactly where they move because you're not watching it as carefully. The drainage ditch, the stream bed, The low ground where water collects. These are natural infiltration routes. Weather complicates everything. Rain. You can't hear as well. Can't see as well. Your field of vision shrinks to maybe 10 feet. Everything beyond is just rain and darkness. The enemy knows this. They often attack during storms because your detection capability is severely degraded. You're standing there, soaked, cold, trying to see through sheets of rain, and somewhere out there, they're moving closer. Fog. This is worse than rain. Fog can reduce visibility to zero. You literally can't see your hand in front of your face, but you still have to maintain watch. So you stand there, in a wall of white, listening desperately for any sound that indicates threat. The enemy might be 3 feet away and you wouldn't know until they were on top of you. Snow. Muffles sound. Changes the appearance of terrain. Covers tracks within minutes. But it also has advantages. Fresh snow shows tracks clearly. You can see if anyone has approached your perimeter. Moonlight on snow can actually improve visibility. Everything is lit up in this eerie blue-white light. Movement becomes more visible, but so do you. You're backlit against the snow. The enemy can see you more clearly than you can see them. You're watching for patterns over time. Maybe nothing happens on your watch tonight, or tomorrow night, or for a week, but you're keeping mental notes. That area of dead ground where you can't see. Has anything changed? The tree line, are there new fighting positions? The wire, are there new paths worn in the ground approaching it? Over time, these patterns build a picture. Intelligence. Threat assessment. Part of guard duty is reporting. When you're relieved, you don't just walk away. You brief your replacement on everything you observed. Unusual sounds at 0230 from the northwest. Possible movement in the draw at 0315 but couldn't confirm. Heard vehicle sounds in the distance at 0400. These details matter. The next guard knows what you saw and heard. They can watch for patterns. They can confirm or refute your observations. False alarms. This is the constant tension. You think you see something. Do you raise an alarm? Wake up the entire unit? Launch flares? Open fire? Or do you wait, try to confirm, risk being wrong if it's a real threat? There's no good answer. Raise too many false alarms and you're the guard who cries wolf. Miss a real threat and people die. Different armies had different protocols. Some required you to challenge first. Halt, who goes there? Give the approaching person a chance to identify as friendly. Others required you to observe and report before taking action. Others gave you free fire authority. See movement in your sector, shoot first, ask questions later. The psychological pressure of this is immense. You're responsible for detecting threats, but you're also responsible for not causing friendly fire incidents, not shooting refugees, not killing civilians who wandered into the wrong place, making life or death decisions on incomplete information, in darkness while exhausted. And here's the final kick. You might do your job perfectly, watch your sector flawlessly, detect every threat, report everything appropriately, and still something might go wrong because the guard to your left or right didn't. You can only watch your sector. The perimeter is only as strong as its weakest link. And that weak link might be the person next to you who fell asleep, who's hallucinating, who's just not as good at this as you are. So you watch, you listen, you smell the air, you fight your own body's need for sleep. You make judgment calls that could save lives or end them. You do this for hours, night after night. This is what you're actually doing on guard duty. This is the job. And tomorrow night, when you take your post again, you'll do it all over. Watching, waiting, wondering if tonight's the night something actually happens, or if it'll be another night of nothing, which is somehow both a relief and a disappointment. The watch continues. It always continues. Chapter 7. The equipment you're stuck with. Let's talk about what you're actually carrying and wearing during your watch. Because the romantic notion of a soldier standing vigilant with perfect equipment is just that. A notion. The reality is you're weighed down with gear that's poorly designed, doesn't quite fit, often doesn't work properly, and somehow manages to be simultaneously too heavy and inadequate for your needs. Start with your weapon. The thing you're holding for 4 to 6 hours straight. If you're a Roman legionary, you've got your gladius. Short sword, about 2 feet long, weighs maybe 3 pounds. Not bad, right? Except you're also carrying your pilum, your spear, 7 feet long, weighs 4 to 5 pounds. And you're supposed to hold this thing at the ready for your entire watch. Your shoulder starts burning after 15 minutes. Medieval guard? You've got options, none of them good. Could be a spear or pike, 10 to 16 feet long, weighs 8 to 12 pounds. The length makes sense. You want reach to fend off attackers. But try holding 16 feet of wood and metal upright for 4 hours. Your arms are shaking within the first hour. So you rest the butt on the ground, lean on it, and hope your sergeant doesn't see you because that's a flogging offense in some armies. Or you've got a crossbow. Better in some ways. You can keep it cocked and ready. But holding a cocked crossbow for hours is also exhausting. The tension is constant. Your grip has to stay firm. And if you accidentally discharge it, you've just announced your position to every enemy within a mile. Musket era. You're holding a smoothbore musket that weighs around 10 pounds. With a bayonet attached, add another pound. These weapons are long, 4 to 5 feet. Holding them at port arms, the ready position, your left arm supports the weight while your right hand grips near the trigger. After an hour, your left arm feels like it's going to fall off. And you can't just set it down. The ground is wet, muddy, dusty. Getting your musket dirty means it might misfire, might not fire at all. So you stand there, holding this increasingly heavy piece of wood and metal, trying to stay alert while your muscles scream. World War I. Lee Enfield rifle. Weighs about 9 pounds. At a bayonet, that's 10 pounds. Magazine loaded with 10 rounds of .303 British ammunition. Now you're up to 11 pounds. This rifle is your life. You've been trained to treat it better than you treat yourself. Sleep in the mud if you have to, but keep your rifle dry and clean. But here's the thing about the Lee Enfield. It's a bolt-action rifle. If you need to fire rapidly, you're working that bolt between every shot. In the cold, with gloves on, with numb fingers, working that bolt smoothly is a challenge. Drop your rifle, get mud in the action, and it might jam at exactly the wrong moment. World War II. M1 Garand for Americans. Weighs 9.5 pounds. Semi-automatic, which is better. Pull trigger, gun fires, automatically chambers the next round. But it's still heavy, still long, still needs to be kept clean. And that distinctive ping sound when the en-bloc clip ejects after 8 rounds, that's the sound that tells every nearby enemy you're reloading. Modern rifles. M4 carbine. Weighs about 6.5 pounds unloaded. Add a loaded 30-round magazine, that's 7.5 pounds. Add optics, flashlight, laser designator, forward grip, all the accessories modern soldiers mount on rails, now you're up to 10 pounds. Less weight than historical weapons, but you're also carrying more ammunition, more gear, more electronics. Now let's talk about what you're wearing. Clothing, armor, load-bearing equipment, because all of this affects your ability to stand watch effectively. Roman legionaries had their larica segmentata, segmented plate armor, covers the torso, weighs about 20 pounds, looks impressive, provides good protection, also makes you sweat like crazy in summer, turns you into a popsicle in winter, and pinches your skin in about 17 different places after you've been wearing it for a few hours. Medieval armor was worse. Chainmail. A full shirt of chainmail, called a hauberk, weighs 30 to 40 pounds. It's distributed across your shoulders and torso, but after hours of standing, that weight compresses your spine. You'll be an inch shorter by the end of your watch. And chainmail doesn't breathe. You're cooking in your own sweat. Take the mail off after watch and your undergarments are soaked. Plate armor. Knights in full harness. 60 to 70 pounds of steel. Sounds terrible, and it is, but it's somewhat better distributed than chainmail. The weight is spread across the entire body. You can move in it, but you can't move comfortably. And standing still in plate armor, you feel every pound. Your joints ache. Your back aches. Everything aches. Most guards throughout history didn't wear full armor. Too expensive. Too uncomfortable for extended periods. You'd have a helmet, maybe a breastplate or buff coat, some form of minimal protection. This is actually worse psychologically. You know you're vulnerable. You know, a lucky arrow or bullet could end you. But you can't do anything about it because full armor isn't practical for guard duty. Napoleonic era. Wool uniform, tight-fitting coat, breeches or trousers. Wool is great in cold weather. Keeps you warm even when wet. But in summer, you're dying. Wool uniforms in summer heat. Standing in the sun on watch, you can lose dangerous amounts of water through sweat. And if you don't have enough water to drink, you're in trouble. The shako or bicorn hat, these tall decorative military hats, are absolutely useless for guard duty. They make your head hot. They catch wind and blow off. They restrict peripheral vision. But you have to wear them because regulations say so. Because appearance matters more than comfort or effectiveness. World War I. Wool uniform again, plus webbing. The British pattern 1908 webbing was a system of pouches and straps that carried your gear. Ammunition pouches, water bottle, bayonet, entrenching tool, gas mask bag. All of this hangs on your body. The weight is distributed, sort of. The straps dig into your shoulders. After a few hours, you've got deep red marks where the webbing bites into you. The steel helmet. The Brodie helmet for British, the Stahlhelm for Germans. These helmets saved lives. No question. They also weigh 3 to 4 pounds sitting on top of your head for hours. Your neck gets tired. The helmet shifts, the liner rubs the same spot on your head over and over. By the end of your watch, you've got a pressure headache and a raw spot on your scalp. Modern body armor. This deserves special attention because it's both life-saving and life-draining. A modern interceptor vest with plates weighs about 16 pounds. Add side plates, that's 23 pounds. This weight sits on your torso, restricts breathing, makes you hot. The plates are hard, rigid. They don't flex with your body. Stand in body armor for 6 hours and you'll have bruises where the plate's pressed against your ribs. And here's the thing. You can't take it off. The rules are clear. You're in a threat zone, you wear your armor. Period. Doesn't matter how uncomfortable it is. Doesn't matter that you can barely breathe. Doesn't matter that you're overheating. You wear it. Boots. Let's talk about boots because your feet carry all of this weight all night long. Roman caligy. Sandal-like military boots. Open-toed. Sounds terrible for cold weather, and it was, but they're actually well designed. The hobnails on the sole gave good traction. The leather was thick and durable. But standing in them for hours, those hobnails would press into your feet through the sole. You'd have bruises on the bottom of your feet matching the pattern of the nails. Medieval boots. Leather. Might go up to the knee. Might be just ankle height. No standardization. If they fit, you were lucky. Most didn't fit well. Tight in some places, loose in others. Blisters were guaranteed. And leather boots get stiff when they dry out, get soft when they're wet. Neither state is comfortable. Military boots of the musket era through World War II followed a similar pattern. Thick leather. High tops. Needed to be broken in. The phrase breaking in boots meant wearing them until the leather shaped to your feet. This process involved significant pain. Blisters. Bleeding. Limping. You'd break in boots while doing guard duty because there was no other time to do it. Modern combat boots are better. Usually, they're designed with ergonomics in mind. Cushioned insoles, ankle support, breathable materials. But you're still standing on hard ground or concrete or whatever surface your guard post occupies for 6 hours. Your feet will hurt. Your arches will collapse. You'll limp for the first few steps after your watch ends. Now let's add the other equipment. If you're a modern guard, you've got a radio. Handheld or mounted on your vest. This is good. You can call for support, report threats, get updates. But the radio adds weight. Needs batteries. The batteries add more weight. And you need to keep one ear on the radio listening for traffic while also listening to your environment. Cognitive load increases. Night vision equipment. Monocular or binoculars. Mounted on your helmet or handheld. This gives you a huge advantage in darkness. But it also adds weight to your head. Changes your center of balance. And staring through night vision for hours causes eye strain. Your eyes aren't designed to look through a single light green tube for extended periods. You'll get headaches, eye fatigue, cold weather gear, if you're lucky enough to have it. Extra layers, parka, gloves, The problem with cold weather gear is that it's bulky, restricts movement, makes it harder to access your equipment, and gloves make it difficult to work your weapon. You need finger dexterity to operate a trigger. Thick gloves reduce that dexterity, so you take the gloves off. Now your hands are freezing. Can't win. Water. You need water on watch. Dehydration degrades performance faster than almost anything else. But water is heavy. A full canteen weighs about 2 pounds. You need at least 2 canteens for a 6-hour watch in hot weather. That's 4 more pounds. And then there's all the small stuff. Flashlight, spare batteries, signaling device, maybe flares, maybe a whistle, maybe a field dressing in case you're wounded. All of this stuff has to be carried. All of it adds weight. By the time you're fully equipped for guard duty, you're carrying 30 to 60 pounds of gear. Standing still. For hours. The equipment doesn't just affect you physically. It affects you mentally. You become hyper-aware of all the stuff hanging on you. It rattles, clanks. It shifts as you move. You're trying to be silent, to be alert, and your own equipment is fighting you. That magazine pouch that seemed fine during the day now seems to make noise every time you breathe. And maintenance. All of this equipment needs to be maintained. Your weapon needs to be cleaned. Your radio needs charged batteries. Your night vision needs to be handled carefully or it breaks. Your armor needs to be checked for damage. Your boots need to be treated and dried out. This maintenance happens on your time off. The time you should be sleeping. So you're standing there, weighted down with decades or centuries of military equipment design. Some of it works well. Most of it works adequately. All of it is a compromise between protection, functionality, and the simple reality that the human body has limits to what it can carry and wear for extended periods. And tomorrow night, you'll put it all on again. Strap on that armor. Hoist that weapon. Lace up those boots. And stand your watch. The equipment doesn't get lighter. You just get used to the discomfort. Welcome to military efficiency, where the gear designed to help you might be killing you almost as effectively as the enemy. Chapter 8. The comrades who share your misery. You're not completely alone on guard duty. Not usually. There's a whole network of other guards, spread out along the perimeter, suffering through their own watches. This should be comforting. It's not, because human beings are unpredictable, and your safety depends on people you might not trust, might not even know, staying just as alert as you're trying to stay. Let's start with the guard immediately next to you. Your left limit and right limit. These guards are your closest backup. If something happens in your sector, they're the first to respond. If you need to sound an alarm, they'll hear it first. This should create a bond. Sometimes it does. Sometimes. You've got the good guards. The ones who take it seriously. Who understand that their inattention could get you killed. These guards are blessings. You can feel the difference. When you glance to your left and see a guard who's alert, scanning their sector properly, holding their weapon correctly, you relax a little. Not much, but a little. You know that side is covered. Then you've got the mediocre guards. Most people fall into this category. They're trying. Sort of. They're staying awake mostly. But they're not as disciplined as they should be. They drift. They daydream. They're going through the motions without full engagement. These guards are a constant low-level anxiety. Will they catch something if it matters? Maybe. Maybe not. And then there's the bad guards. The ones who fall asleep. Who sit down when they should be standing. Who aren't watching their sector at all. These people terrify you. Because if the enemy attacks and comes through their sector, you won't know until it's too late. Their failure becomes your emergency. Different armies handled this differently. The Roman army had a system where guards would be checked randomly throughout the night. An officer, a tesserarius, would make rounds. If they found you asleep, you were in for fustuarium. Death by beating. This system had 2 effects. 1, it kept most guards awake out of sheer terror. 2, it meant you didn't trust the guard next to you because they might report you if they saw you nodding off. Medieval armies relied more on mutual supervision. Small groups of guards, 5 to 10 men, would be responsible for a section. They'd watch each other as much as they watched for enemies. If one man fell asleep, the others would wake him before an officer found him. This created squad cohesion but also meant the entire group could fail together if they all got too comfortable. World War I introduced a different dynamic. The trenches were crowded. Guards weren't isolated individuals. You were standing watch in a trench bay with dozens of other soldiers sleeping, resting, or performing other duties nearby. This had advantages. If you saw something, you had immediate backup. Call out and 20 men would be on their feet in seconds. But it also had disadvantages. Noise discipline was terrible. Some soldier coughing, another snoring, equipment clattering. All of this interfered with your ability to hear threats in no man's land. And there was this constant low-level resentment. You're standing watch while these other guys sleep. Tomorrow they'll stand watch while you sleep, theoretically making it fair. But right now, at 3 a.m., when you're freezing and exhausted, watching them sleep feels deeply unfair. The guard relief is a special relationship. This is the person taking over your watch. You're handing your sector to them. This transfer has rituals. You brief them on what you've observed. You show them the current situation. You make sure they understand the orders. And you judge them. Are they alert enough? Do they seem capable? Or are you handing this sector to someone who's going to immediately fall asleep? In some cases, you know the guard relieving you personally. Maybe they're a friend. Maybe you've served together for years. This creates trust. You know they'll do the job right. You can walk away from your post without worrying. Other times, it's a stranger. New replacement. You don't know their capabilities. You don't know if they'll stay awake. So you linger. Check they understand everything. Maybe even watch them for a few minutes before you leave. Then there's the chain of command. The sergeant or corporal responsible for your section of the perimeter. This person checks on guards throughout the night. In theory, this is reassuring. Someone's making sure everyone stays alert. In practice, it's one more thing to deal with. You're standing there, fighting sleep, and here comes the sergeant asking if you've seen anything. No, sergeant. All quiet, sergeant. And you have to be alert enough to give a proper report or you'll catch hell. Some leaders are good at this. They check on you because they genuinely care about your welfare and the mission. They bring you hot coffee if available. Share a cigarette. Give you a few words of encouragement. These leaders make guard duty slightly more bearable. You'll push yourself to stay alert because you don't want to let them down. Other leaders are petty tyrants. They check on you hoping to catch you doing something wrong so they can punish you. They're looking for any excuse to assert dominance. These leaders make guard duty a misery. You're not just fighting the enemy and exhaustion. You're fighting your own chain of command. The worst dynamic is when you don't trust your fellow guards at all. This happens in units with poor morale, poor discipline, or recent casualties that haven't been replaced properly. You're standing your watch knowing the guard to your left might be asleep. The guard to your right might be high if drugs are available. The backup you're counting on might not materialize if something happens. This creates a horrible mental calculation. Do you focus entirely on your own sector and hope others do their jobs? Or do you try to cover multiple sectors, stretching yourself thin because you don't trust the others? There's no good answer. Focus too narrowly and you might miss a threat from an angle that should have been covered by someone else. Spread yourself too thin and you're less effective overall. Different military cultures address trust differently. Elite units, special forces, guards regiments, these organizations developed intense camaraderie. Every member was vetted, trained extensively, held to high standards. In these units, you could trust the person next to you absolutely. They would stay awake. They would do their job. This trust made guard duty almost bearable. Regular line units had more variation. Some were good. Some were terrible. A lot depended on the quality of the officers, the experience of the soldiers, and how long the unit had been together. A unit that had served together for years developed trust. A unit of fresh replacements thrown together last week? Trust was non-existent. There's also the issue of communication during guard duty. You're not supposed to talk. Silence is essential for hearing threats. But humans are social creatures. Standing in darkness and silence for hours is psychologically difficult. So guards develop methods of quiet communication. Hand signals. whispered words, rocks thrown to get attention. These methods allow coordination without compromising security. But communication can also be a distraction. Two guards start whispering to each other. One thing leads to another. They're having a full conversation. Neither is fully focused on their sector. This is how attacks succeed. The enemy waits for guards to get comfortable, to drop their vigilance, to start talking. Then they move. The replacement cycle creates another trust issue. Over time, you lose guards, casualties, illness, rotation to other units. New guards arrive. These new guards don't know the sector, don't know the routines, don't know the other guards. There's a breaking-in period where they're learning and somewhat unreliable. During this period, experienced guards have to work harder, compensate for the new guy's inexperience. And sometimes you're the new guy. You arrive at a unit, get assigned to guard duty. Everyone else has been doing this for months. They know every rock and tree in their sectors. They've developed their systems. And here you are, trying to figure it out, knowing you're the weak link. The others are depending on you and you're not ready. That pressure is intense. Friendships form on guard duty. Shared misery creates bonds. You and another guard pull the same watch rotation for weeks. You suffer together, freeze together, fight, sleep together. This creates connection. These friendships can last a lifetime. Veterans from different wars often say the friendships made during their service were the deepest they ever experienced. And many of those friendships were forged during long nights on watch. But you also make enemies. That guard who fell asleep and got your squad extra duty. That sergeant who wrote you up for a minor infraction. That replacement who panicked and fired at nothing, compromising everyone's position. These grudges fester. Military life is close quarters. You can't escape people you hate. They're right there every day, every watch. The final element is the knowledge that if things go bad, these are the people you're fighting with. The guard to your left, the sergeant making rounds, the relief coming in 4 hours. These people are your army. Individually, they might be flawed, incompetent, or actively dangerous. But collectively, they're all you've got. The enemy is out there in the darkness. Whatever problems you have with your comrades, they're still on your side. So you stand your watch, aware of the guards around you, hoping they're doing their jobs, knowing they're probably hoping the same about you, trusting them because you have to, not necessarily because you want to, united in shared suffering, divided by individual inadequacies. This is the paradox of guard duty. You're alone, but you're not. And which of those states is worse depends on the quality of the people around you. And tomorrow night, you'll stand watch with them again. Same faces, same doubts, same hopes that everyone stays awake and does their job. The watch continues, always with others, always somehow alone. Chapter 9. The punishment for failure. Let's be very clear about what happens when you fail at guard duty. Because the military throughout history has taken sleeping on watch, dereliction of duty, or allowing a breach extremely seriously. We're not talking about a slap on the wrist. We're talking about punishments designed to be so severe that you'd rather stay awake for 48 hours straight than risk them. We already touched on the Roman fustuarium. Let's go deeper into what that actually meant. You fall asleep on watch. You're caught. Your commanding officer, in front of the entire cohort, declares your sentence. You will be beaten to death. Not by professional executioners, by your fellow soldiers. Every man in your unit is required to participate. They form a circle. You're in the middle. They've got clubs, stones, whatever's available. And they beat you. This isn't quick. You don't die in the first few blows. You're conscious for most of it. You feel every impact. You hear the men you served with, men you considered friends, grunting with effort as they kill you. The whole process might take 5 minutes, might take 20, depends on how enthusiastic your unit is about the punishment. Why did Rome use such a brutal system? Por encourager les otros, to encourage the others. Every soldier watching this execution knows that could be them, that if they fall asleep, they'll be in that circle. This fear is powerful. Keeps soldiers awake when every fiber of their being screams for sleep. It's effective. It's also absolutely barbaric. Medieval armies had different approaches depending on the commander and the situation. Some followed similar execution protocols. Hanging was common. The sleeping guard would be hanged in view of the entire army. Sometimes they'd use a short drop, meaning the condemned didn't die quickly from a broken neck. They'd strangle slowly, 5 to 10 minutes of convulsing and gasping while everyone watched. Other medieval punishments focused on humiliation and pain rather than death. Flogging was standard. You'd be tied to a post or frame. Your back would be bared. A strong man with a whip or cat-o'-nine tails would deliver the sentence. 30 lashes, 40, 50. Each strike would rip skin. By the 10th lash, your back would be bleeding. By the 20th, muscle tissue would be exposed. By the 30th, you'd probably have passed out from pain and blood loss. If you survived flogging, you'd have scars for life. Your back would be a mass of scar tissue, but you'd be alive. And everyone who saw those scars would know what you did. That mark followed you forever. The early modern period introduced more creative punishments. The Spanish army used the strapado. Your hands would be tied behind your back. A rope attached to your wrists would be thrown over a beam. They'd hoist you up, hanging by your wrists behind your back. This dislocates your shoulders in seconds. The pain is indescribable. They'd leave you hanging for hours. Some guards died from this. Hearts gave out from the pain. Others had permanent shoulder damage. Couldn't lift their arms above their heads for the rest of their lives. The British Navy had its own special hell for guards who slept on watch. Flogging around the fleet. This is exactly what it sounds like. You'd be tied to a boat, rowed from ship to ship in the fleet. At each ship, you'd receive a portion of your sentence in lashes. Maybe 200 lashes total, delivered over hours, across multiple ships. Sailors on every ship would be assembled to watch. The psychological torture of knowing you had hours of beating ahead of you, of seeing your blood drip into the water between ships. This broke men completely. Napoleonic armies used a combination of flogging and forced labor. Sleep on watch, you might get 200 lashes. Then you'd be assigned to the punishment battalion. These were units given the most dangerous, most grueling tasks. Digging fortifications under fire. Carrying supplies through enemy territory. Serving as shock troops in assaults. You'd stay in the punishment battalion until you were killed or until your sentence was served, whichever came first. The American Civil War saw both Union and Confederate forces using a variety of punishments. Bucking and gagging was popular. Your knees would be pulled up to your chest. A stick would be inserted behind your knees and in front of your elbows, immobilizing you. A gag would be tied in your mouth. You'd be left like this for hours, sometimes in the sun. Circulation would be cut off to your legs. The gag would make you unable to swallow, causing you to drool uncontrollably. It was humiliating, painful, and occasionally fatal if left too long. Tied on the rack was another favorite. Not a medieval torture rack. This was being tied spread eagle on a wagon wheel or similar structure. Left in the sun for 8 or 12 hours. No shade, no water. Soldiers subjected to this often suffered heat stroke. Some died. World War I saw a return to execution for the most serious cases. The British Army executed over 300 of its own soldiers during the war. Many of these executions were for desertion or cowardice, but some were for sleeping on watch when it resulted in casualties. The execution method was firing squad. Here's how that worked. You'd be blindfolded, tied to a post. A squad of your fellow soldiers, usually 10 to 12 men, would be lined up facing you. They'd be given rifles. Some rifles would be loaded with live ammunition. Some would be loaded with blanks. None of the soldiers would know which they had. This was supposed to ease their conscience. Maybe my rifle had a blank. Maybe I didn't actually kill him. The squad would fire on command. If you were lucky, you'd die instantly. Multiple bullets through the heart and lungs. But firing squads weren't always precise. Sometimes the condemned would be hit in non-vital areas. They'd be wounded, alive, suffering. An officer would then step forward with a pistol and deliver a coup de grace to the head, making sure the job was finished. The psychological impact on the firing squad members was severe. They'd just shot a fellow soldier. someone they might have known, someone who might have saved their life in battle. The guilt haunted them. Many firing squad members reported nightmares, depression, psychological trauma that lasted decades after the war. World War II armies generally moved away from execution for sleeping on watch, unless it directly resulted in casualties. More common was court-martial, reduction in rank, forfeiture of pay, and assignment to dangerous duties. The American military used non-judicial punishment extensively. Article 15. This allowed commanders to impose punishment without a court-martial. Standard punishment might be 30 days extra duty. That means after your regular duty hours, you'd be assigned additional work, might be 12 or 14-hour days for a month. Sleep deprivation from punishment causing you to be even more likely to fail at guard duty again. The irony was lost on no one. Reduction in rank meant loss of pay and prestige. If you were a sergeant, you'd be busted down to private. All those years of service, all that experience, meant nothing. You'd be wearing private's insignia, taking private's pay, being treated like the lowest member of the unit. The shame of this was intense. Modern military justice is theoretically more humane, but the punishment for serious guard duty failures is still severe. Depending on the circumstances and the outcome, you could face court-martial, imprisonment in military prison, dishonorable discharge. A dishonorable discharge is a life sentence of a different kind. It follows you forever. You can't get most jobs because employers see that discharge and know you failed badly. You lose access to veterans' benefits, healthcare, education assistance, housing programs. Everything you earned through service is stripped away. Military prison, the brig, is its own special punishment. You're confined with other service members who committed serious crimes. The guards are military police. There's no sympathy, no understanding. You're a disgrace to the uniform. You're treated accordingly. Sentences can range from months to years depending on the severity of the offense. But across all eras, all armies, the most powerful punishment isn't official. It's social. Your fellow soldiers know you fell asleep. They know you can't be trusted. In a military unit, trust is everything. Lose that trust and you're functionally useless. Nobody wants you in their squad. Nobody wants you watching their back. You become isolated, an outcast. Some guards who failed never recovered from this. They'd serve out their term in disgrace. Return to civilian life carrying that shame. The knowledge that they failed when it mattered most. That their weakness, their inability to stay awake, might have cost lives. The fear of this punishment, both official and social, is a constant pressure during guard duty. It adds to the stress, adds to the exhaustion, creates a feedback loop. You're more afraid of being punished for falling asleep than you are of the enemy. This fear keeps you awake, until it doesn't, until your body simply can't continue. And then you face the consequences. And tomorrow night, if you're still alive and not in prison or medical care, you'll stand watch again. Knowing exactly what will happen if you fail. Feeling that fear. Using that fear. Hating that fear. The punishment is always there, hanging over you like a sword. Will tonight be the night you can't fight off sleep? Will tonight be the night everything falls apart? The watch continues. The punishment waits. And you stand there, hoping you never find out exactly how severe it can be. Chapter 10. What the darkness does to your mind. Forget the physical. Forget the cold and the exhaustion and the equipment. Let's talk about what extended time in darkness does to your psychological state. Because standing guard night after night fundamentally changes how your brain works. And not in good ways. You're 2 weeks into a rotation where you're pulling guard duty every night. For hours per night. Always the same time slot. Midnight to 4 a.m. Your circadian rhythm, your body's natural sleep-wake cycle, is completely destroyed. Your brain no longer knows when it should be asleep and when it should be awake. During the day, you're walking around in a fog. You're technically awake, but not really. Your reaction time is slowed. Your decision-making is impaired. You have trouble concentrating on simple tasks. This is well documented in sleep deprivation studies. After 2 weeks of getting 4 hours of broken sleep per night, your cognitive function is equivalent to someone who's been awake for 24 hours straight. You're drunk without drinking. You're impaired without drugs. This is just what the schedule does to you. But the night is when things get weird, because darkness does things to the human mind. We're diurnal creatures. We're designed to be active during the day, asleep at night. Forcing yourself to be alert in darkness goes against millions of years of evolution. And your brain rebels. Let's start with visual distortions. You're staring into darkness for hours. Your eyes are adapted to low light as well as they're going to get. But there's a problem. The human visual system is designed to extract information from light. In darkness, it's working with minimal data, so it starts making things up. Pareidolia. This is the tendency to see patterns where none exist. Faces in clouds. Shapes in static. In darkness, this tendency goes into overdrive. That tree stump looks exactly like a crouching person. That rock formation resembles a machine gun nest. Your brain is desperately trying to make sense of what it's seeing, so it imposes structure on randomness. And you can't turn this off. You know intellectually that it's a tree stump. You've looked at it during the day. It's just wood. But at night, every time you look at it, your brain insists it's a person. It's moved. Hasn't it? Was it there before? Are you sure? Peripheral vision is worse. Movement in your peripheral vision is detected by different cells in your retina than central vision. These cells are more sensitive to motion but less precise. So you're constantly seeing things move at the edge of your vision. You snap your head to look directly at it. Nothing there. This happens dozens of times per watch. Each time your heart rate spikes. Each time you're flooded with adrenaline. Each time you scan the area trying to determine if it was real. After hours of this, you start to doubt your own senses. Did I really see that? Or am I imagining it? If you raise an alarm every time you see something in your periphery, you'll be calling in false alarms constantly. But if you ignore these signals, you might miss a real threat. There's no good solution. You make judgment calls based on incomplete information and hope you're right. Auditory hallucinations are even more insidious. We touched on sounds earlier, but let's get specific about what your brain does when it's desperate for auditory input in a relatively quiet environment. It generates its own. You're standing watch. It's quiet. Maybe wind sounds. Maybe distant artillery if you're in a war zone. But mostly quiet. Your brain, which evolved to process constant auditory input, doesn't like this. So it starts finding patterns in white noise. That wind rustling through leaves? Your brain interprets it as whispered conversation. You're absolutely convinced you hear voices. You strain to make out words. You can almost hear them. But when you focus directly on the sound, it resolves into just wind. Phantom footsteps. This is incredibly common. Guards across different wars and eras report hearing footsteps approaching. Rhythmic. Getting closer. They raise their weapon, challenge the approaching person, and there's nothing. The footsteps stop, or they were never there. Your brain took some random sound, some combination of your own heartbeat and ambient noise, and constructed a pattern it recognized. Footsteps. Music. Some guards report hearing music in the distance. Faint but distinct. This is your brain's pattern recognition gone wild. Some combination of mechanical sounds, wind, and random noise gets interpreted as music. You're hearing a melody. You could hum along, but it's not real. The most disturbing auditory hallucinations are voices calling your name. This happens to a significant percentage of guards who are severely sleep-deprived. You hear someone call your name, clear as day. You answer, nobody there. This is your brain, so desperate for human connection, so isolated in darkness and silence, generating the sound it most wants to hear. Someone acknowledging your existence. Now let's talk about the emotional and psychological effects of prolonged night watch duty. Because standing alone in darkness, knowing you're responsible for detecting threats, knowing that failure might mean death for yourself or others, this creates a specific type of stress. Hypervigilance. This is a state where your threat detection is turned up to maximum. Every sound is potentially dangerous. Every shadow is potentially an enemy. Your fight or flight response is constantly activated at a low level. Adrenaline and cortisol, stress hormones, are chronically elevated. This is exhausting. Your body isn't designed to maintain this state for hours at a time, night after night. Over time, hypervigilance becomes your baseline. You can't turn it off. Even when you're off duty, even when you're supposedly resting, you're scanning for threats. Jumpiness, oversensitivity to sudden sounds or movements, difficulty relaxing. This is the beginning of what we now recognize as PTSD symptoms. Paranoia. This is different from appropriate caution. Paranoia is when you start believing that threats are more likely than they actually are. You start seeing malign intent in everything. That new guard who just joined your unit? Maybe they're a spy. That unusual sound at 0300? Definitely the enemy probing your defenses. That order from your sergeant? Probably going to get you killed. This paranoia is a defense mechanism gone wrong. Your brain is trying to protect you by assuming the worst. But it makes you unable to trust anyone, unable to accept that sometimes random things just happen. Everything becomes a conspiracy, a threat, a plot against you. Isolation. Even though you're surrounded by other soldiers, guard duty is fundamentally isolating. You're in your own head for hours every night, and the thoughts that fill that space aren't good. You think about home, people you miss, things you've seen, things you've done. In darkness and silence, these thoughts have nowhere to go. They circle endlessly. Obsessive thoughts, intrusive thoughts, memories you don't want to relive. For guards who've seen combat, who've lost friends, the night watch is when those memories surface. You can't distract yourself. You can't talk to anyone. You're alone with the worst moments of your life, replaying them over and over. Depersonalization and derealization. These are dissociative symptoms where you feel disconnected from yourself or from reality. Prolonged stress and sleep deprivation can trigger these states. You look down at your hands holding your weapon and they don't feel like your hands. They feel like they belong to someone else. You're watching yourself from outside your body, or reality itself seems unreal. Everything feels dreamlike. You're going through the motions, but it doesn't feel like it's actually happening. This is your brain's way of protecting you from overwhelming stress. Creates psychological distance. But it also makes you less effective at your job because you're not fully present. Anxiety and panic. The constant low-level stress can spike into acute anxiety or full panic attacks. Your heart suddenly races. You can't catch your breath. You're sweating, shaking, convinced something terrible is about to happen. These attacks are terrifying because you can't control them. They come out of nowhere. And when you're on guard duty, you can't just walk away and calm down. You have to stay at your post, experiencing the full intensity of the panic while trying to maintain vigilance. Depression. After weeks or months of night watch rotation, many guards develop symptoms of depression. Sleep deprivation contributes. Lack of sunlight contributes. The constant stress contributes. You stop finding pleasure in things that used to make you happy. Food tastes like ash. Letters from home make you feel worse, not better. The only emotions you can reliably access are anxiety and numbness. Everything else feels distant. Suicidal ideation. This is the dark end of the spectrum. Some guards, ground down by endless watches, by fear, by isolation, start thinking about ending it. Not because they want to die necessarily, but because they want the watch to end. They want the fear to end. They want the exhaustion to end. And death is the only permanent end they can imagine. Different armies have different rates of suicide, but across military history, guards have always been at elevated risk. The isolation, the access to weapons, the impaired decision-making from sleep deprivation is a dangerous combination. And here's the cruel part. The military knows this. They've known for centuries that guard duty damages people psychologically. But the work has to be done. The perimeter has to be watched. So they rotate people through, trying to spread the damage across as many soldiers as possible so no one person gets completely destroyed. It's a utilitarian calculation. Sacrifice the mental health of many to protect the lives of all. The only respite is dawn. When the sun comes up and your watch ends, there's a moment of relief. The darkness is over. For now. But you know that tomorrow night you'll be back. Standing in darkness. Fighting your own mind as much as you're watching for enemies. And over time, the darkness starts to feel more familiar than the light. You become a creature of night. Your eyes prefer darkness. Your thoughts prefer darkness. The day feels alien and uncomfortable. You're adapting to an environment that humans aren't designed for. And that adaptation comes at a cost. Welcome to the psychological battlefield, where the enemy isn't just out there in the darkness. The enemy is inside your head, and it never sleeps. Chapter 11. The stories guards tell themselves. To stay sane during endless hours of guard duty, soldiers across history have developed coping mechanisms. Stories, fantasies, mental worlds to escape into while their bodies remain at their posts. Let's talk about where your mind goes when you're trying to stay awake but can't interact with anyone or anything. You're 90 minutes into your watch. The initial alertness has faded. You've already cataloged every feature of your sector. You've already imagined 17 different attack scenarios and your response to each. Now you need something to occupy your mind for the remaining 2.5 hours. So you tell yourself stories. The most common story is the future. You plan your life after military service in exhaustive detail. Where will you live? What job will you have? You design your house. You pick out furniture. You choose paint colors for rooms that don't exist yet. You plan your daily routine. Wake up at 7. Coffee. Breakfast that isn't military rations. A job where nobody shoots at you. Evenings at home with family. This future is bright and detailed and completely consuming. You can lose yourself in this story for an hour easy, planning every aspect of a life you hope to have. The fantasy is so vivid that you can almost taste that coffee, can almost feel the comfort of a real bed, almost hear your wife's voice or your children's laughter. This is what keeps you going. The promise that this won't last forever, that there's a life waiting after the watch ends. Some guards build elaborate fantasy careers. They'll be doctors. They'll be teachers. They'll start a business. They plan everything. What courses they'll take. What degree they'll earn. What their office will look like. None of this might actually happen. But during those dark hours, it's real enough to provide comfort. Others retreat into the past. Nostalgia becomes a refuge. You replay happy memories. That summer before you enlisted. That girl you dated. That fishing trip with your father. You revisit these memories again and again until they become worn smooth like river stones. You've thought about that summer so many times during guard duty that you're not sure anymore which details are real and which you've added over countless retellings to yourself. These memories are bittersweet. They remind you of happiness. They also remind you of everything you're missing. That girl married someone else. That father is getting older without you there. That summer is gone and you can never return to it. But still, you return to these memories because they're better than thinking about your current reality. Fantasy scenarios are popular. You imagine what you do in various situations. If you won the lottery, if you were famous, if you had superpowers. These scenarios are pure escapism. They have nothing to do with reality, but they occupy your mind. You can spend an hour working out exactly what you'd do if you suddenly inherited $1 million. Who you'd help, what you'd buy, how you'd quit the military in spectacular fashion. Sexual fantasies are extremely common. You're a young person, full of hormones, isolated from romantic connections. Your mind goes to sex. A lot. You replay memories of past relationships. You create fantasies about people you know, about celebrities, about idealized partners who don't exist. These fantasies can be incredibly detailed and time-consuming. They serve the dual purpose of occupying your mind and providing some small amount of pleasure in an otherwise miserable situation. But these fantasies can also make you feel worse, because after you've spent an hour thinking about romance and intimacy, you come back to reality, to standing in mud and darkness, holding a weapon, watching for people who want to kill you. The contrast is painful. Religious and spiritual meditation is another common approach. If you're religious, you pray. You recite prayers you've memorized. You have long conversations with God in your head. You ask for protection, for your family's safety, for the strength to make it through this watch, for forgiveness for things you've done or will do. These spiritual practices can be deeply comforting. They provide structure, give meaning to suffering, create a sense that there's purpose behind all this, that you're not just randomly suffering, that there's a plan, even if you can't see it. For guards who aren't religious, philosophical contemplation serves a similar purpose. You think about big questions, the meaning of life, the nature of good and evil, why wars happen, whether any of this matters in the grand scheme of the universe. These thoughts can be depressing or uplifting depending on where they lead, but they occupy significant mental space. Problem solving is a common mental exercise. You take a problem, real or hypothetical, and work through it methodically. Maybe it's a mechanical problem. How would you fix a broken engine? You think through every step, diagnose the issue, plan the repair. Or it's a mathematical problem. Calculate something complex in your head. Or it's a strategic problem. How would you attack your own position? Where are the vulnerabilities? This type of thinking keeps your analytical mind engaged. It's productive in a way that pure fantasy isn't. And for guards with technical or mechanical aptitudes, it's satisfying. You're building something in your mind, creating solutions, even if those solutions never get implemented. Some guards compose things in their heads, letters to family, poetry, song lyrics, speeches they'll never give, stories. The act of composition is demanding enough to keep you focused but creative enough to be engaging. Guards throughout history have composed beautiful works during night watches. Some remembered and written down later. Many lost to memory. Memory games are another tool. You try to remember things in detail. The lyrics to every song by your favorite band. The names of everyone in your high school graduating class. The complete plot of your favorite movie. Every street in your hometown. Pushing your memory like this is mentally engaging. It's also a way of holding onto your identity. These memories are who you were before the military. Keeping them fresh keeps that person alive. Counting is the simplest mental occupation. You count things, seconds until the end of your watch. Stars in the sky, heartbeats, breaths. The rhythm of counting is meditative. It's soothing. It's also mind-numbing, which might be exactly what you need. Some guards develop elaborate fantasy narratives that continue across multiple watches. You're the hero of your own adventure novel. Each night, you continue the story. New chapters, new challenges for your fictional self to overcome. This serialized daydreaming becomes something to look forward to. What will happen next in the story? You get to decide because you're both author and audience. But all of these coping mechanisms have a danger. If you're too deep in your mental stories, you're not fully watching your sector. You're not fully alert to your environment. This is the balance every guard struggles with. Occupy your mind enough to stay sane, but not so much that you become ineffective. And some guards fail at this balance. They get so lost in their thoughts that they might as well be asleep. They're physically present, eyes open, looking at their sector. But they're not processing what they see. Not really. They're in their heads, living in stories, while the real world happens around them. The worst is when you can't escape into stories anymore. When you're so exhausted, so ground down, that you can't even generate fantasies. Your mind is just empty. You're standing there, staring into darkness, thinking nothing. This is a dangerous state. It often precedes falling asleep or having a psychological break. Different military cultures have different attitudes toward mental escapism during guard duty. Some recognize it as necessary and even encourage it. Tell yourself stories, whatever keeps you awake. Others view it as a dereliction of duty. You should be focused completely on your sector. No daydreaming, no fantasies, total vigilance. In practice, total vigilance for 6 hours is impossible for most people. The mind wanders. That's what minds do. The best guards develop the ability to occupy their minds with stories while maintaining a background awareness of their environment. Split attention. Part of you is planning your future or reliving your past. Part of you is watching and listening for threats. This skill takes practice. Some never develop it. And tomorrow night, when you take your post, you'll retreat into your mental worlds again. Those stories are what keep you human. They remind you that you're more than just a guard. More than just a body holding a weapon. You're a person with a past and a future and an inner life. Even if nobody else can see it. The watch continues. And so do the stories. They have to. Because without them, there's just darkness and time and the slow erosion of everything that makes you yourself. Chapter 12. When the dawn finally comes, the sky starts to lighten. Not suddenly. Gradually. Almost imperceptibly at first. But you notice. You've been staring into darkness for hours. You're attuned to every change in light level. That first hint of gray on the eastern horizon is the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. Because it means your watch is almost over. Let's talk about dawn from a guard's perspective. Because it's not just the end of a shift. It's a psychological deliverance. A rebirth. Every dawn you survive on guard duty is a victory. You made it. You didn't fall asleep. Didn't get killed. Didn't fail. The sun is coming up and you're still here. The light changes everything. Literally everything. Objects that were threatening shadows become recognizable. That crouching figure? Just a bush, like you thought, like you hoped. That movement you kept seeing? Branches swaying in wind. The no man's land that was an infinite void of potential threats becomes a measured space. 75 meters to the enemy wire. 3 shell craters along your front. 1 dead tree at the right boundary. Your entire sensory experience shifts. You've been relying primarily on hearing. Now vision comes back online. You can see your sector clearly. That rock you thought might have moved? It's right where it was yesterday. That depression in the ground where you imagined enemy soldiers gathering. Empty. The light brings certainty. And certainty, after hours of doubt and fear, is an incredible relief. Your body starts to change too. You've been in a state of heightened alertness for hours. Now, with dawn approaching, your nervous system begins to stand down. You can feel it happening. The tension in your shoulders eases slightly. Your breathing deepens. The adrenaline that's been keeping you upright starts to ebb. This is dangerous because you're not actually off duty yet. Your watch doesn't end when the sun comes up. It ends when your relief arrives. But your body knows the danger period is mostly over. Most attacks don't happen in daylight. You're safer now. The sounds change. Birds start their morning calls. If you're in a natural environment, dawn chorus is a symphony of avian activity. Every species announcing its presence, defending its territory, seeking mates. The sound is life. It's the opposite of the predatory silence of night. It's dozens of creatures going about their business, completely unconcerned with human warfare. These birds provide another service. They're alert systems. As long as they're singing, there's no immediate threat in their vicinity. If they suddenly go silent, something's wrong. So you listen to them not as background noise but as information. A layer of security you don't have to maintain yourself. Human activity starts to increase as well. Your fellow soldiers begin to wake. Sounds of people moving, coughing, talking quietly. Fires being lit for breakfast if that's allowed. The smell of coffee if you're lucky enough to have it. These sounds and smells are civilization. They're normalcy. After hours of isolation and primal vigilance, the return of human society feels profound. But dawn also reveals new problems. With light, you can see the state of your defenses. That wire barrier needs repair. Those sandbags are degrading. The trench wall has collapsed in one section. During darkness, these problems were invisible or unimportant. Now they're obvious and demanding attention. Your watch isn't over, and you're already mentally cataloging the work that needs to be done today. For guards in certain historical periods, dawn brought specific rituals. Medieval castle guards would sound the morning horn or bell. This signaled that the night had passed safely. It woke the garrison. It announced to the surrounding area that the castle still stood. This ritual was part of the guard's duty. You couldn't leave your post until you'd performed it. In military trenches of World War I, dawn brought stand to. This was the practice of having the entire front line manned at first light because dawn was a common time for attacks. So even though your watch was supposed to end, you'd have to remain at your post, weapon ready, scanning no man's land while the light improved. Only after stand 2 was completed usually 30 to 60 minutes after sunrise, would you be released. This meant your 6-hour watch often became 7 or 8 hours. You'd been on duty since midnight. The sun comes up at 6. Stand to lasts until 7. You've been awake and vigilant for 7 hours straight. By the time you're finally relieved, you're a zombie. Your body is running on fumes. Your mind is mush, but you can't show it. You have to maintain military bearing. Report properly. Hand off your position professionally. The act of being relieved has its own emotional complexity. Your replacement arrives. Fresh, rested. They slept while you stood watch. And now they're taking over. There's often a moment of resentment. Why did you have to pull the midnight watch while they got to sleep? It's not rational. It's not their fault. The rotation is the rotation. But in your sleep-deprived, exhausted state, that resentment feels real. You give your report. Everything you observed. Anything unusual. Current status of the sector. Your voice is hoarse from not talking for hours. Your words are slightly slurred from exhaustion. The incoming guard nods, takes their position, and you're free. The walk back to your sleeping area feels surreal. You're moving through a world that's waking up while you're shutting down. The disconnect is jarring. Other soldiers are eating breakfast, starting their day. You're ending yours. Your day happened in darkness. Their day is just beginning. If you're lucky, you can sleep now. But sleep doesn't always come easily. You're exhausted, yes, but you're also wired. The adrenaline hasn't fully cleared your system. Your mind is still scanning for threats even though you're no longer at your post. You lie down and your brain keeps working, reviewing the watch, replaying moments of concern, planning for the next watch. Some guards develop techniques for transitioning from watch to sleep. Rituals. Take off your gear in a specific order. Clean your weapon immediately. Write a brief note about your watch in a personal log or letter. Eat something small. These actions create a buffer between vigilance and rest. They tell your brain it's okay to stand down now. But even with these techniques, sleep is often poor quality. You're sleeping during daylight when your circadian rhythm says you should be awake. The environment is noisy. Other soldiers are active. Light seeps through walls or tent fabric. You sleep fitfully, never deeply, never restfully. And in a few hours, you'll wake up having gotten maybe 4 hours of broken sleep, and you'll have to be functional for the rest of the day until it's time for your next watch. The only exception is when you're rotated off watch duty entirely. Maybe you've completed a week of night watches. Now you get a few days off. Or you're being rotated to different duties. That first night where you don't have watch, where you can sleep through the entire night from evening to dawn, is extraordinary. You'd forgotten what real sleep feels like. The depth of it. The restoration. You wake up feeling almost human. But these breaks are temporary. Guard duty is a constant in military life. You'll be back on watch soon. Tomorrow night. Next week. But for now, in this moment, as dawn breaks and your watch ends, you're free. The sun is up. The darkness is over. You survived another night. You walk away from your post. Behind you, the new guard is settling in, beginning their watch. Ahead of you is your bunk, or your tent, or your barracks. Sleep is waiting, however imperfect. And then tomorrow, the day's duties. And then tomorrow night, maybe you're back on watch. Maybe you get a night off. But eventually, inevitably, you'll be back. Standing in darkness. Watching. Waiting. But not right now. Right now, the sun is shining. You're off duty. For these few precious hours, the watch is someone else's problem. You've earned this rest. And you're going to take it, however brief, however inadequate. The dawn came. You're still here. That's enough. That has to be enough. Because tomorrow night, the darkness returns. And so will you. Closing. So, how's your day been? You've just experienced approximately 12 hours of standing guard across various historical periods. Your feet should be numb. Your eyes should be aching. Your mind should be fragmented from hours of forced vigilance and sleep deprivation. You've frozen with Roman legionaries on Hadrian's wall. Stood in trenches watching no man's land fill with morning mist. Pulled perimeter duty in jungles and deserts and every miserable place humans have fought wars. You've learned what the cold really feels like when you can't move, can't warm up, can't escape it. You've experienced the sounds of the night, trying to distinguish between threats and shadows and your own mind playing tricks. You've felt the crushing weight of exhaustion, the desperate need for sleep that can never be satisfied on watch. You've carried equipment that's simultaneously too heavy and inadequate. You've stood next to guards you don't trust and hoped they'll do their jobs anyway. You've faced punishments that range from brutal to barbaric for the simple act of falling asleep. You've felt your mind twist and fracture under the strain of prolonged darkness and isolation. You've told yourself stories just to stay sane. And you've watched the dawn break, bringing relief that lasts only until the next nightfall. But here's the wildest part about all of this. Millions of soldiers throughout human history have done this. Not once, not for a single miserable night, but night after night after night. For weeks, months, years. Guard duty wasn't an occasional assignment. It was a fundamental part of military service. Every soldier, from the lowest private to the highest-ranking officer in their early career, stood watch. They did this with worse equipment than you can imagine, with less support than seems possible, with punishments that would be considered war crimes today. They stood in conditions that would kill most modern people within hours. And they did it because the alternative was worse, because someone had to watch, because the perimeter had to be maintained, because civilization, such as it was, depended on someone being willing to stand in darkness and face whatever came out of it. Think about the Roman legionary stationed in Britain for 20 years. How many thousands of hours did he spend on watch? How many times did he stand on that wall, staring into darkness, wondering if tonight would bring a Pictish raid? And he did it knowing that if he fell asleep, his own brothers in arms would beat him to death. Think about the soldiers in the trenches of World War I, rotating through front-line positions for 4 years, pulling guard duty every single night they were in the line, standing ankle-deep in mud and worse, watching for an enemy that might attack or might just sit there, forcing you to watch endlessly. The psychological toll was so severe that shell shock became epidemic. We called it that because we couldn't admit that standing guard in hell for years destroyed minds. Think about the guards at isolated outposts throughout history, fort walls in the American West, trading posts in Siberia, colonial garrisons in tropical diseases-ridden jungles. These soldiers pulled guard duty in places where help was days or weeks away, where an attack meant almost certain death because reinforcements couldn't arrive in time. And they still stood their posts, night after night. The Vietnamese tunnel rats in Siu Chi, the Soviet guards on the Eastern Front in winter, the castle sentinels during medieval sieges that lasted months, the ship watches during Age of Sail voyages that lasted years. Every single one of them experienced a version of what we've described tonight. The cold or heat, the exhaustion, the fear, the mental strain, the physical punishment their bodies endured. And here's what might make you grateful tonight. You don't have to do this. You're lying in a comfortable bed or sitting in a comfortable chair. You're not holding a weapon, not watching for threats, not fighting to stay awake while your body screams for sleep. You're not standing in freezing rain or suffocating heat. You're not carrying 40 pounds of gear that doesn't quite fit. You're not being threatened with death for falling asleep. The perimeter of your life is being maintained by someone else. Right now, this very moment, there are soldiers standing guard at military bases around the world, at embassies, at checkpoints, at borders. They're doing the job that someone has always had to do, standing in darkness, fighting exhaustion, staying alert so others can sleep safely. These modern guards have better equipment than their historical counterparts. Night vision, body armor, communications equipment, climate-controlled guard shacks in some places. But the fundamental experience hasn't changed. Standing watch is still standing watch. The hours are still long. The boredom is still crushing until it's interrupted by terror. The exhaustion is still real. The sacrifice is still being made. So tonight, when you close your eyes and drift off to sleep in your safe, warm, comfortable environment, maybe say a quiet thank you. Thank the guards throughout history who stood watch so civilization could exist. Thank the guards standing watch right now so you don't have to. They're out there, in darkness, watching, so you can sleep. The watch continues. It always continues, even when we don't see it, even when we forget about it. Someone is always standing guard. Someone is always facing the darkness. Someone is always fighting to stay awake, stay alert, stay ready. And tomorrow night they'll do it again. And the night after that. And the night after that. The watch never ends. It's been continuous since humans first gathered in groups and realized that someone needed to watch for danger while others slept. You've just experienced a tiny fraction of what they endure. A glimpse of that world. A taste of that life. But they live it. Fully. Completely. Night after night after night. So sleep well tonight. You've earned it just by witnessing what others live through. And remember, when you wake up tomorrow in safety and comfort, that someone stood watch last night to make that possible. Someone always does. The darkness comes. The watch begins. And somewhere always a guard is standing vigil. For you. For all of us. Thank them when you can. Honor them by remembering. And maybe, just maybe, appreciate the fact that you're not out there standing in the dark, holding a weapon, fighting to stay awake while the hours crawl past. Good night. Sleep well. Someone else has the watch.